Hallo, daar zijn we weer. Even kijken of iedereen langzaam naar binnen stroomt. Dat ziet er allemaal goed uit. Mochten jullie in de chat zitten, laat het even weten of jullie het allemaal goed kunnen zien. Of jullie de presentatie al zien. Of jullie mij goed kunnen zien. Of mij goed kunnen horen. Laat het even weten in de chat. Dan weten we of we kunnen gaan beginnen. We hebben genoeg om over te praten in ieder geval vandaag. NIS2, een moeilijk onderwerp. Moeten we er wel aan voldoen, niet aan voldoen. Wanneer gaat het nou ook van start? Dat is ook een hele interessante. Ik zie Ronald er voorbij komen, Wilke al voorbij komen. Ik wacht wel even tot er nog iets meer reacties, zodat we weten dat iedereen er is. Nou, ik ben ook erg benieuwd naar hoe jullie ervaring is als MSP met het NIS2. En hoe we jullie vandaag kunnen entertainen. En vooral wat mee kunnen geven over hoe we nou een NIS2 ready gaan worden. Even kijken. Yes. Ik zie nog het een nog binnenkomen. Leuk. Leuk om iedereen weer te zien. Welkom jongens vandaag. We gaan vandaag kijken naar een webinar over hoe jij als MSP zijn de complete controle over NIS2 met Heimdal zijn M-XDR kan halen. Nog een acroniem erbij. Dus buckle up. En daar gaan we. Voor wie mij niet kennen, mijn naam is Robin Smit. Ik ben sales manager binnen Portland en ook MSP Transformation Specialist. Wat eigenlijk inhoudt, is dat ik aan beide kanten bezig ben. Dus aan de ene kant ben ik bezig met vendoren, om daar een go-to-market strategie te bepalen. En aan de andere kant ben ik bezig met MSP's, om hun te helpen met hun operationele uitdagingen, maar ook een hele tech-stack beoordelen. En te kijken waar ze in kunnen verbeteren, om uiteindelijk een high-performance MSP te worden. Ik ben aan het trainen voor mijn derde halve marathon. Ik hou nogal van ritme en structuur. Daar hoort ook discipline bij. Mijn derde halve marathon. Mijn vierde is ook al gepland voor volgend jaar maart. Dus ik weet ook niet waar die obsessie ineens vandaan komt. En daarnaast nog mijn laatste punt is... Portland is mijn enige zakelijke relatie. Wat ik langer dan 2 jaar vol heb gehouden. En er komen nog zoveel mooie dingen en mooie jaren aan. Zoals jullie Portland kennen, al 27 jaar, langer dan 25 jaar, zitten we in de markt. Brengen we de meest innovatieve tools naar de markt. En zoals je ook hier op het scherm ziet, zitten er vast producten tussen die je vandaag de dag nog steeds misschien wel gebruikt. Allicht via Portland hebben ingekocht en waar heel veel relaties zijn ontstaan. Deze hele historie maakt het ook zo dat wij een enorme gesprekspartner voor MSP's zijn. Die kunnen helpen om jullie te ondersteunen bij het kiezen van de juiste tools binnen jullie techstack. Maar wat doen we nou als Portland? Wat is onze toegevoegde meerwaarde? Wij zijn niet jullie traditionele distributeur. Dus we zijn niet van het logo's pushen, het alleen maar producten verkopen. Wij zien onszelf als een orchestrator. En de methode die we daarvoor gebruiken, dat heet de Portland Performance Prism. Daar zorgen we voor dat je niet alleen kijkt naar welke tech je allemaal hebt, maar ook naar de cijfers die daarbij horen. En hoe kunnen we dan voor zorgen dat we jullie kunnen helpen om dat MKB Nederland, maar ook in België, eindelijk een stukje veiliger te maken. En de resultaten die we daarbij bieden, is een verhoogde EBITDA, waar iedereen het vandaag de dag over heeft. En we zorgen ervoor dat jullie en betere cybersecurity services kunnen leveren, die kunnen bundelen en dat ook nog eens makkelijk kunnen verkopen aan eindgebruiker Nederland. De 6 P's van een high performance MSP. Dit zijn de 6 P's. Iedereen kent ze waarschijnlijk wel van marketing. Dit zijn de 6 P's die wij hebben samengesteld waar elke MSP als een geheel mee bezig is. Wij hebben een onderzoek bij heel veel high performance MSP's wat onze partners zijn. En iedereen is mee bezig met profitability, platform protection, process, partnership en people. Wat eigenlijk inhoudt dat we onze MSP op basis van deze 6 P's volledig kunnen bekijken of dat een high performance MSP is vandaag de dag. Maar wat is onze unieke waarde richting de MSP's? Wij zorgen er namelijk voor dat wij met de MSP Stack Audit ervoor kunnen zorgen dat we jullie benchmarken door middel van onze Prism om te kijken hoe jullie techstack zich weerhoudt tegen bijvoorbeeld het NIS2 framework, waar we vandaag de dag ook voor gaan zitten. Daarnaast kunnen we ervoor zorgen dat we consolidatie en het simpel maken van jullie technologie stack. Als je kijkt naar security, bijvoorbeeld 3 tot 11 tools gemiddeld in plaats. Dat kunnen we een stuk consolideren. En op 15 man personeel gemiddeld 27 dashboards te beheren. We helpen jullie om dat te kunnen consolideren in een zowel lean als een geïntegreerd platform. Dit alles met in het achterhoofd om jullie EBITDA uiteindelijk te boosten. We zorgen ervoor dat we met de Free MSP Stack Audit, dat we daarmee een begin kunnen maken in hoe we jullie kosten kunnen verlagen, jullie services kunnen verhogen, daarmee de inkomsten en de winst en uiteindelijk jullie EBITDA. Dat is ons doel. Waarom hebben we dit doel? Dat hebben we omdat we volgens het SLI zien we dat elke high performance MSP een EBITDA heeft tussen de 23 en de 28% vandaag de dag. Waar een gemiddelde MSP een lagere EBITDA heeft dan 5%. Waar dat door komt, zijn heel veel verschillende redenen, maar ik zou het kunnen samenvatten als deze ijsberg. Veel MSP's zijn geneigd om te focussen op de known cost, dus de day-to-day operatie. We weten precies hoeveel personeel we moeten betalen, welke auto's we allemaal in de plaats hebben, hoeveel ons kantoor kost en wat onze licentieprijs voor het RMM is. Maar waar we vaak niet naar kijken, omdat we vaak van alles de best in class willen hebben, waar Adam straks nog veel meer over zal vertellen, is de unknown cost. Dus op die 27 dashboards die we gemiddeld beheren, hoeveel tijd zijn we kwijt aan producttrainingen, roadmaps bijhouden, support voeren, het managen van je integraties en het leggen van automatiseringen, het zorgen voor efficiëntie. En het laatste punt, heb je eindelijk klant gewonnen, gefeliciteerd, nu moeten die klant gaan onboarden. Hoe lang zijn we daarmee bezig op 27 dashboards? Deze hele ijsberg, daar helpen we mee om bij elke MSP te kijken hoe we niet alleen maar de known cost, maar ook de unknown cost kunnen verbeteren om uiteindelijk richting die high performance MSP te groeien. Vandaag gaan we zitten. And then I switch over to English because we got our friend Adam over here. Adam is an ex-cyber detective. He's already 16 years in cybersecurity, and he did 15 years in the law enforcement. Adam, welcome so much. It's good to have you on stage. And today we're going to talk about the NIS2 legislation. It's very hip, very trending, but also I see a lot of postponing, and I'm really keen to understand how your view is on this. So welcome, Adam. Thanks for joining, man.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, we've got a lot to cover today. So yeah, NIS2, DORA, NIST cybersecurity framework, and CIS 18. So very much welcome the questions as I go along. But yeah, I've got a lot to go through, so I'm going to start galloping through it now. Mate. Right. So first off, though, let me just set the scene as to who I am and why I'm talking to you today. So QR code you see in the bottom right hand corner of the page there is my LinkedIn profile. But as Robin's just mentioned, my background is in law enforcement. I was a police officer for 15 years in the UK. And latterly, I led what's known as the Covert Operations Management Unit. So that's 3 distinct teams. The Covert Authorities Bureau, and these guys are responsible for obtaining covert authority legislation. So effectively using the Investigatory Powers Act. And this was so that we could then support activities, provide tactical advice, support activities such as covert surveillance in the real world, or entering a property in the real world, but also in the digital world, entering people's online accounts, so effectively hacking. The second team were the communication data investigators, and these guys and girls were responsible for obtaining communications data from the likes of Google, Facebook, Apple, and then more locally from telephone and internet service providers. And this is 2 types of communication. First would be the computer, the networking, effectively, computers speaking to computers. And then also the human level communication. So effectively the instant messaging chatting that we have, for example, or the telephone calls that we place to one another. And the final team, the third team, as you probably guess, the cybercrime team. Now, this team was responsible for conducting cybercrime investigations, but also for providing tactical and digital support in relation to traditional crimes, whether that be a harassment all the way up to murder. Following this role, I then moved into the private sector where I acted as a cybersecurity consultant and then helped the largest certification body in the UK provide Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. So in effect, I was an auditor for Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. So I've helped hundreds of businesses of all sizes, both in the UK, but internationally as well, improve their cybersecurity. And I've got that unique perspective of looking at cybercrime, how it happens from victim all the way through to arresting cyber criminals. So hopefully I'll be bringing some of that to you today. And this is what we're going to be covering. Quite a lot. So we've got real world case studies to look at. We're looking at the cybersecurity standards I mentioned earlier. Then we'll look at the who, what, and why of all of this. Before finally I wrap up with introducing Heimdal, the company I work for now as a cybersecurity advisor. And then we'll open the floor to questions and answers. So as I say, a lot. Right, without any further ado, then let's get going. We're going to start with a case study that some people call the first cyber war. And it all starts with the Bronze Soldier. So the Bronze Soldier was originally called the Monument to the Liberators of Tallinn, Tallinn being the capital city of Estonia. And the memorial was unveiled in September 1947, 3 years after the Red Army reached Tallinn during World War II. And the Red Army were the army and the air force of the Russian Soviet Republic. For Russian speakers in Estonia, the Bronze Soldier represents the USSR's victory over Nazism. But for ethnic Estonians, Red Army soldiers were not liberators. They were seen as occupiers, and the Bronze Soldier is a painful symbol of half a century of Soviet oppression. Roll the clock forward 6 decades, 2007, the Estonian government decided to move the Bronze Soldier from the center of Tallinn to a military cemetery on the outskirts of the city. And this decision sparked outrage in Russian language media. And for context, ethnic Russians make up about a quarter of Estonia's population of 1.3 million people. Now, on the 26th of April, 2007, Tallinn erupted into 2 nights of riots and looting. 156 people were injured, 1 person actually died, and 1,000 people were detained. Some of these protesters threw bottles and stones, some threw petrol bombs. Department stores and other shops in the city centre were looted, and cars were smashed, billboards set on fire. You can imagine the scene, you can see it there. Chaos. Police fired tear gas and rubber bullets, and ultimately, this just goes to show the strength of emotion that the Bronze Soldier evoked. On the 27th of April, Estonia then fell under a cyber attack, which lasted 22 days. Online services from Estonian banks, media outlets, government bodies began to see unprecedented levels of internet traffic. Huge waves of spam were sent by botnets, and huge amounts of automated online requests swamped servers. The result for Estonians was that cash machines and online banking services were sporadically out of action, government employees were unable to communicate with each other, and newspapers and broadcasters suddenly found they couldn't do their job. They couldn't deliver the news. Now, most of the attacks that had any real influence on the general public were distributed denial of service, so DDoS type attacks. And they range from individuals running DDoS attacks on a small scale to expensive rental of botnets to deploy large-scale DDoS attacks. Most of the malicious network traffic was from outside of Estonia. And the instructions for attacking Estonian sites were disseminated in many Russian language forums and websites and had indications of political motivation. So what was the outcome of all of this? Well, first up, a 20-year-old man was the first person to be convicted for taking part in a cyber war against Estonia. And Dmitry Galakevich was fined 17,500 kroons for an attack which blocked the website of the then governing Reform Party. But this is the interesting bit, and this is why I'm talking about this today. So in response to this attack, NATO conducted an internal assessment for their cybersecurity and infrastructure defences. And this assessment resulted in a report issued to the Allied defence ministers in October 2007, so some months after the initial incident, DDoS attack. And while we've never seen the full contents of this report, they haven't been made publicly available, we can gather insights from official statements that were made and the key recommendations that were made. So we believe that the report emphasised the need for a comprehensive cyber defence policy to enhance the alliance's ability to protect its information and systems against cyber threats. And the policy, it now exists. It's the NATO strategic approach to safeguarding its network and support member states. NATO have also affirmed that cyber attacks could trigger Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, something which we seem to be hearing a lot about, particularly in UK news at the moment. And in addition, NATO have committed to assisting member nations in developing their cyber defense capacities and responding to cyber incidents. But ultimately, this incident underscored the importance of cybersecurity within NATO's core task of deterrence and defense, leading to initiatives aimed at enhancing the resilience of national networks and infrastructure among member states. And the third box in the screen you see there was the establishment of the Cooperative Cyber Defence Centre of Excellence, so the CCDC OE. And this was in response to that report's recommendations. And in May 2008, NATO did establish the CCDC OE. And you guessed it, it's based in Tallinn in Estonia, where all of this started. And this center effectively focuses on research, training, and exercises in cyber defense. And it marked a shift, a significant shift in NATO's approach to cybersecurity in acknowledging the ever-evolving nature of threats in the digital environment and the necessity for collective defense mechanisms to address this. So let's have a look at some of these cyber standards, because ultimately 2007 gave birth to the era we're now in of the compliance era. There's so many standards, so many different frameworks for us to look at and to follow. First up, NIS2, so the Network and Information Security Directive 2. What is it? Well, it's EU-wide legislation aimed at improving the cybersecurity resilience of critical and important entities. It's mandatory risk management, supply chain security, instant reporting within 24 hours, executive accountability, and stricter supervision. And the purpose of this is to standardize and elevate cybersecurity readiness across EU's critical sectors. Next up, DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act. What's this about? Again, it's an EU regulation focused on ensuring that financial entities can withstand and recover from ICT disruptions and cyber threats. Key features: risk management, again, instant classification and reporting, digital operational resiliency testing, and third-party risk management. The purpose: to harmonize cybersecurity and resilience in the EU's financial sector, so industry specific here. Next up, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. So this is a voluntary framework. It's created by the US National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it's all about managing cyber risk. It's based on 6 core functions: govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And the purpose here is to provide a common language and a systematic approach to dealing with cybersecurity risk management. And the last one I want to show you here is the Center for Internet Security's 18 controls. And this is a set of... Oh, Robin, see you got your hand raised there.
Whoa, mate, I didn't know that it was going so effectively with the hand raise. I'm so sorry to bother within disrupting the story, but this is one very interesting with the question that we received. So maybe we can do a question in between there.
Yeah.
And secondly, I read something with KLM. It's a Dutch company. It's a very big, of course, airplane company. They had a vendor breach that falls within the NIS2 detective then, right?
Yeah,
And
certainly.
so it says that the NIS2 legislation says that you need to review the security operations and the protocols that your vendor has. How can they make sure with all the vendors that an MSP has, they track all the legislation and everybody is compatible with it?
Yeah, certainly. And this is why, if I just bring on to this next point here, this is why it's really important first to recognize what you have to do, so what you're mandated to, and NIS2, for some organizations, they will fall into that bracket of we have to do this, but this is compliance standard that being in this industry, we need to achieve. But for others, and on the right-hand side of the screen now, you'll see best practice frameworks. So NIST, CSF, and CIS 18, they're voluntary. They're all about people that maybe aren't mandated to complete NIS2 or other standards, but they want to improve their cybersecurity and they want to be speaking the same language. Ultimately, all of them achieve the same thing because it's all about improving your cybersecurity. And going back to the point in relation to KLM there, how do they make sure that the people they're working with, the people in their supply chain, are reaching the appropriate standards? Well, this is when you first create that relationship with another organization. It has to be in the contract. You have to make sure that you have certain controls put in your contract. So making sure that they maintain certain standards and making sure that they provide evidence or allow you to audit them to show that those standards are met. And it's so important because in the case that you've just described there, this then becomes important when we're looking at timelines for notifications. NIS2 dictates or explains, describes how, when we should be notifying different stakeholders. And because of this, this means that we'll update our C-certs, for example, and these C-certs will then speak not just within our industry, not just within our country, but across industries, across countries. So one attack on one industry then becomes public knowledge to other countries, other industries, making sure that you've got that protection there. But ultimately, it all comes back to when you set those partnerships up, making sure that there's something written down from day one, rather than getting to that point where you're in the middle of an incident or a problem and then trying to negotiate or agree who has to do what. Then it has to be agreed at the contract point.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the question. I got two questions from the same Casper. Thanks so much, Casper, for sending out the questions. This NIS2 legislation doesn't know any supply chain responsibilities, right? Everybody who's working with NIS2, companies that need to comply with the NIS2, is coming on their term. Is it correct, or do you have a supply chain responsibility there?
So it's all about risk management. If I jump onto my next slide, it's all about risk management. That's where the supply chain falls into it. So if I bring up all the slides here. There you go. So ultimately, what we're looking at here with the what has to be done section is there's three key articles that we need to be thinking of. The first one is governance. So this is basically saying that cybersecurity is responsible for senior people within the organization, and we have to have effective controls in place, management, accountability, and we have to be providing training to everyone, including management. And the key piece here is Article 21 for the supply chain point, which is risk management measures. So you have to take appropriate and proportional measures. That's across technical, operational, and organizational measures to manage the risks. And that is where the supply chain piece falls in, because as soon as you start working with another organization, whether that be for an operational purpose, whether that be through sharing information, as soon as you start working with them, potentially you open yourself up to that risk. And that is where NIS2 then kicks in to say, right, because there is risk here, how are you managing it?
Yeah,
and that hopefully then addresses the question you've got.
So it's not a hard supply chain responsibility, but it all falls down with the risk mitigation that you want to. Right? Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah.
Right. That's a very good one.
I think that's the beauty of NIS2, that it doesn't go specifically. If I look, for example, and they're very different, but just to make the point, in the UK we've got something called Cyber Essentials, and this gives you essentially 5 areas you need to look at. It's specific though. It tells you need to implement MFA, you need to have strong passwords, you need to have X, Y, and Z in place. NIS2 isn't about that. NIS2 is about empowering you, but saying, right, you need to be responsible at management level for cybersecurity. You need to make sure that you're effectively running an effective risk management program for cybersecurity, which is all about making you aware, making you understand the threats that you face. So it doesn't just become a tick box measure that you go, oh yeah, we've got antivirus, we've got firewalls in place, we can forget about that for 12 months. Risk management is, as you know, it's an ongoing process, and it's something that you need to address on a daily basis to be able to keep on top of it as threats evolve. And as we see at the moment with AI, the speed at which things are happening means that we as defenders have to start adopting AI to defend against the AI attacks we're facing, as well as improving that security awareness training.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much, Adam.
No worries. And just to tie in as well with the whole what has to be done point, and I touched on it slightly earlier about reporting obligations. The third article that I want to call out is Article 23. And this is all about incident reporting, including the need to report without any undue delay within 24 hours of becoming aware of a significant incident. And this is vital as well, because we spoke about before, that whole communication piece across EU industries, countries, means that the quicker people start making others aware, the quicker we can defend and prevent that attack from escalating. And just to finish off this slide here, like the whole the why comply column, the most important reason to do this is for cybersecurity. I touched on the whole thing of compliance being a tick box, but the reason that we do this is to improve our cybersecurity. Hopefully, that's the reason that most people are doing it. But if that isn't enough, there is another reason to do it, and that is the risk of fines. So non-compliance can incur fines depending upon what type of entity you are. So for essential entities, it's fines of up to 10 million euros or 2% of annual turnover. And then for important entities, up to 7 million euros or 1.4% of total annual turnover. And it's worth pointing out as well, when we talk about fines, I mentioned about the accountability of management, and that is actually quite an important fact here, because top management can be held liable if cybersecurity is not in place. So that's them being held reliable rather than looking at the company level. And the final point, like you've just mentioned really with the whole supply chain piece, once you are achieving the standards, once you are effectively managing risk and you're NIS2 compliant, it breeds confidence among the supply chain. So when you sign those contracts to say, yes, we are, and we will maintain compliance with these standards, and this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, it breeds confidence. You know this is an organization, a partner that you want to work with. So let's move on to DORA, and I'm going to fly through this just so we cover everything we need to today. So DORA, as I mentioned, who's affected? This is financial entities, and in terms of what has to be done, you have to have comprehensive risk management frameworks in place, conducting those regular resilience testing assessments I mentioned. You need to show that you're managing third-party risk effectively as well, and have instant reporting mechanisms in place as well. And again, as before, why would you comply? Well, ultimately to improve your cybersecurity. But again, with DORA, there are fines. So you need to make sure that if you're in that industry and DORA applies to you, you're in a good position. Right. I'm not going to hit the voluntary frameworks just yet, because I want to move across to a second case study. And this one occurred in May 23, and it relates to the Danish critical infrastructure. So ultimately, this was exposed to the most extensive cyber attack experienced in Denmark to date. 22 companies that operate as part of the Danish energy infrastructure were compromised in a coordinated attack. And the result ultimately was that attackers gained access to some of the company's industrial control systems, and several companies had to go offline into island mode. And the attackers knew in advance who they were going to attack, and they got it right every single time. So we're going to look at how they did that and why they did that. And we're going to be looking at it through the eyes of the cyber kill chain. So let me just start by introducing the cyber kill chain. For those of you that haven't heard about it, it's a framework used to understand how cyber attacks work step by step. The stages are reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and then action on objectives. And the kill chain itself, it's not just theory. In this attack, we'll go through and you can see each stage and how it works. Before we do that, though, I'm going to be diving into the details from SectoCert. And it's really important to understand that this presentation is based on the report from SectoCert. So anybody can go and download SectoCert's, who are Denmark's Cybersecurity Centre for Critical Infrastructure, go and download this report and read the details of it. It's a really interesting report. So before we dig into the kill chain, let me just set out the timeline so it all makes sense. So this spans from April the 25th to June the 2nd, 2023, and it will happen really quickly. So April the 25th, Zyxel will publicly disclose a critical firewall vulnerability. A week later, May the 1st, SectoCert issued a warning urging members to patch immediately. May the 11th, so just remind you, we started here April 25th. The 1st of May, SectoCert reminded everyone, we need to apply these patches. May the 11th, some 10 days later, the attack begins. And 11 out of the 16 companies, I'm going to be mentioning in a moment, were breached using crafted packets targeting a specific port 500 in this case, on the affected firewalls. The firewalls were exploited, configurations were stolen, and controls were then handed over to attackers. By May the 22nd, attackers had pivoted and infected firewalls with downloaded malware. Joining botnets, they even launched DDoS attacks. We mentioned these earlier. And over the next 48 hours, things just ramped up even more. So we saw attacks on energy providers 13 through to 21, and these were rapid fire. And then it escalated again on May the 24th, because Zyxel dropped 2 more vulnerabilities. May the 25th, activity linked to Sandworm, which is a Russian state advanced persistent threat, so APT, was spotted. and 3 remote sites went dark. SectorCert escalated this to national authorities. And then by the end of May, the exploit code had gone public. CISA had added it to their known exploited list, and attack attempts had actually skyrocketed to 200,000 attack attempts per day. And then by the 2nd of June, Zyxel came out publicly and confirmed that active attacks were underway. Now, this is a textbook example of how fast things can spiral if patches aren't applied, and why early warnings should never, ever be ignored. So let's go through the cyber kill chain. It starts with reconnaissance, the first stage of the kill chain, and in this case, a masterclass in precision. So out of the 300 potential targets, the attackers didn't miss once. And that isn't luck, that is pure preparation. They knew exactly which systems were vulnerable and where they were. And this info wasn't scraped from Shodan or public scans. This was deeper, possibly non-public, and maybe even the suggestion is insider sourced. And the level of proficiency shown here tells us the attackers weren't just spraying and praying, they were calculated. They were surgical and likely had access to detailed information prior to this attack. And this is why asset visibility and threat intel sharing matters so much. Let's move across to weaponization, where that intent is turned into capability. So the attackers, armed with deep knowledge of the Zyxel vulnerabilities, crafted custom exploit code, tailor-made to trigger remote code execution on specific firewall models. And this wasn't off the shelf, say it was crafted just for the job. And it was precisely built to exploit a known weakness and bypass defenses silently. Now, they saw the opportunity, they knew that patch rates were low, and they moved fast, weaponizing the vulnerability that they'd found before the defenders could respond. And let's look at delivery. This is where the attack is actually launched. So the method here was a specially crafted network packet fired directly at port 500, as we mentioned. And this wasn't noisy or even brute force. It was direct, it was stealthy, and it was perfectly timed. Most firewalls didn't even flinch. The VPN stayed up, services stayed live, and no alarms were raised. And that's the danger with this kind of delivery. It doesn't rely on user error or dodgy email links. It's a quiet packet aimed at the right port, slipping in under the radar. And as we see, it's worked. So next up, exploitation. And this is where we start to see the real damage. Once those crafted packets hit the mark, the firewall didn't just process it, it followed the instructions, reaching out to an attacker-controlled server and executing additional code. This was the moment of breach, and the attackers were in. And from there, everything spread really fast. The exploit automated the process, pulling down payloads, layering the groundwork for full control. No user interaction, no obvious signs, just silent takeover. And this is something, as we mentioned before, with the whole AI and automation piece, is being made a lot easier to repeat across multiple targets and very difficult for defenders to defend against. So let's move on to installation, where attackers move from access to then having persistence. So once the firewall was compromised, it quietly pulled in various payloads from the attacker's server. They weren't smash and grab tools. They were designed to integrate into the system, blend in, and in effect, hold the door open so attackers can come back as and when they want it. And the goal here is to leave a smaller footprint as possible while maintaining that longer term control. And at this point, the firewall was still working as expected. No alarms were triggered. So effectively, the attackers were operating freely and in the background. So next up, have a look at command and control. And this is where the attackers don't just break in, they start to take over. So after exploitation, the firewall pulled in additional payloads from attacker-controlled servers, not noisy or bloated, just enough to establish that persistent access and keep communication open. And it's all about coordination. The attackers could now reach in anytime, issue commands, steer the compromised devices as they wished. And the setup, we said, minimalist, but very effective. There was no flashy malware here, no disruption to normal services, just quiet, ongoing reachability that let the attackers stay completely in the driving seat and completely undetected. So let's move on to actions on objectives, where the attackers actually did once they had control. And here's the clever part. They didn't break anything. The firewalls kept working, business as usual on the surface. Nobody knew. But behind the scenes, those same devices were being completely dominated. They're being used to launch DDoS attacks, brute force other networks, and spread malware, all while the victims are completely unaware. And again, this is a classic case of diversion. No visible disruption, just quiet abuse of trusted infrastructure. And that is why the attackers could maintain access for so long, because nothing looked wrong. And the outcome here, I mentioned Sandworm earlier, Russian-based APT, but can we confidently say Sandworm were involved? Well, during the second wave attack, SectorCert detected a single packet communicating with a known Sandworm-linked IP address. And while this raised concerns, and you can draw your own conclusions from it, there wasn't any concrete evidence to confirm Sandworm's involvement with this. SectorCert did note that cyber attack attribution is particularly difficult, so they remained on the fence on this one too. But they did confirm that this was the largest attack, as I mentioned before, in Danish critical infrastructure, compromising those 22 energy companies. And the fact that the attack demonstrated thorough preparation, precise targeting, and they again emphasized the need that without their senior network and close collaboration with members, suppliers, and authorities, the attacks could have had even worse operational consequences. So the recommendations that came out of the back of this, they made 25 recommendations that cover technical and organizational measures. They advised to limit the exposure of services, ensuring only those that needed to be exposed to the internet were exposed to the internet. Timely updates, that whole patching piece, we've seen it before with WannaCry, but it's vital. Once a patch is available, we should be looking, particularly when they're critical and high, to implement those as soon as possible. Contingency planning, so develop and rehearse, that's a big one. Rehearse plans to handle systems being compromised. And then also network mapping and segmentation. Robin.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt, mate. I got two questions, especially about the patch management. That's something that is very still. It's one of the all the services that an MSP is offering nowadays. But we still see it time by time. We still see it go wrong. For example, last year, the CrowdStrike, of course, the whole half of the world was down because of a lazy patch. Yesterday, we saw something coming out with, for example, the vendor Enable. In their central environment, there were 2 CVEs exploited. How can it still go wrong with those, kind of big companies out there, having a lot of relationships, having a lot of risk mitigation? How is this still possible, and how is this still a problem?
That's a really good question. Like, particularly, you look at the CrowdStrike incident, the impact of that was massive, and how that was possible, purely my speculation, but processes clearly could not have been followed there for whatever reason it may be. And with Enable, obviously they've been quick to act, and they've got out 2 patches already. And the problem seems to come most of the time because most patches, there's obviously those cases like CrowdStrike is the big one. There's obviously those cases where the patch is going to cause more problems itself, but the majority of the problem comes from applying the patch, good patches, and making sure we're doing it in a timely manner. Like we saw with this example here, that the amount of time that passed, even SectorCert, they gave a reminder to people, you need to make this patch, still 10 days later, and not everyone had done it, and that's when the attack started. So this is where patching is difficult. I totally respect that, and I've worked with organizations where they bought a vulnerability scanning tool, and the IT team have made a decision not to run it, because if they didn't run it, then they wouldn't find out about all the vulnerabilities and basically create themselves a to-do list. It's completely the wrong attitude. But what is the right attitude is automatic patching. So there is technology now, and Heimdal offer it, we'll touch on it in a bit, but there is technology available now that can take the burden out of patching, because it is constant. We're constantly seeing new CVs, we're constantly seeing new updates that need to be applied, security updates that need to be applied. So automatic patching is very much the answer to that headache. And it ties back into NIS2 and that risk management. What are you doing about this huge risk of vulnerabilities that are out there and being exploited? Well, the answer to that question should be effective vulnerability management.
That's it. All right. Thanks so much, Adam.
No worries, Rob. Right, let's move on. I'm going to wrap up really quickly on the other frameworks you mentioned here. So I mentioned the NIST cybersecurity framework. This is voluntary, as I said, and this is all about governing identity, protecting, detecting, responding, and then recovering. This is something that I've used in the past with multiple businesses, and I've got to admit, I really like it. It just works, it makes sense, and it's a really good way of, for those organizations that aren't mandated to comply with certain standards, it's a really good way of starting to embed that security culture. And it's internationally recognized. It's an American standard, but I've used it for companies that are based not just in America, but in England, in Germany, and ultimately around Europe as well. So it's a very good framework. And the whole why comply, well, the word is probably wrong here because you can't comply with this. It's not a standard that you reach. It's a framework that you use. But by reaching this framework, you can demonstrate effective risk management of cybersecurity. You can demonstrate that you're implementing a security awareness program. You can demonstrate that whole governance piece. So it's really valuable when you're talking with partners, trying to win new business, to be able to say, look, we've got our cybersecurity in order. We're doing X, Y, and Z when it comes to these different areas, and we can demonstrate this to you. Basically, meeting the requirements of NIS2, but on a voluntary basis and with the structure of NIST CSF. And again, CIS 18. So this can apply to anyone and everyone. It's a voluntary standard, we say. There's 18 controls that effectively improve your security posture. Things like asset management, access control, vulnerability management, incident response, web browser protection, pen testing as well. And pen testing we don't talk about a huge amount, but it's included in here. And the whole point of it is meant to be prescriptive, it's meant to be prioritized, and a way to simplify security to best practices. So essentially you improve your cybersecurity posture, but it's more prescriptive than, say, the NIST cybersecurity framework that we just looked at is. And again, why comply? Well, it improves your cybersecurity, gives you the confidence because you know you are complying with standards. You're following essentially the letter of these standards to go, yeah, we know we've got this in place. We know we've got effective vulnerability management in place because we follow the recommendations of CIS 18. So allow me now to introduce Heimdal, and I'm going to do this twofold. So first up, just to explain who we are. Now, Heimdal, we have the broadest tech stack, should I say, across Europe. And the beauty of Heimdal is that we unify security. So our all-in-one platform integrates seamlessly across all digital environments, streamlines workflows, enhances visibility with real-time monitoring and management of security events. And we provide 24/7 SOC services as well to give you peace of mind if that is what you want. And let me move across to what we offer. So you can see here, we've got, well, I'm not going to read them all out because we don't have time, but you can see on your screen here, we've got a lot of security products here. And what I want you to do is to cast your mind back to that Danish attack that we just spoke about. 22 individual pieces of information being combined can be particularly powerful. And this is exactly what Heimdal does. So if we think about those attacks and the information that was coming in, and we think about what CCERT do, SectoCert, and this occasion do, they communicate information. Imagine if you could do that for your own network. So you're receiving information about emails attacks, network attacks, the attacks on endpoints. You're receiving information about unpatched devices. All of this information feeds into one singular platform where you can then make informed risk decisions, rather than having to go over here to this one platform to look at your email security, over here to look at vulnerability management. You get what I'm saying. You get the gist of it. This is a simplification of cybersecurity, which is exactly what we're about. And here's the deeper dive breakdown of our products. And you probably can understand why we've now got the trust of over 15,000 organizations worldwide, because we've got one platform and it provides total security. Now, let's have a look at the cyber kill chain of the incident that we just looked at, and then fit in Heimdal to all of these. So reconnaissance. In those early stages, attackers gather intelligence, and they did it silently. Well, to counter this, Heimdal's Threat Hunting and Action Center gives you real-time visibility into that unusual activity across your network, which would help you identify those early signs of probing or scanning. Weaponization, vulnerability management. So this is where the attackers turn their attention to discover vulnerabilities and how to exploit them. Well, with patch and asset management, this steps in, continuously scanning for missing patches and pushing updates, that automated patching, across your estate. So you cut off that easy win that we've been speaking about, unpatched software. And we saw in the Denmark case, we saw that almost 3 weeks have passed between the vulnerability being announced by Axel to actually the attack happening. 3 weeks is massive. Delivery. So this one is all about the exploit now on the move, typically through those crafted packets we spoke about, or even phishing attempts. But Heimdal's Threat Hunting and Action Center plays a critical role again here. It detects malicious traffic, detects patterns, and it intercepts payloads before they reach the endpoint in question. Exploitation. And this is where the code then gets executed and the breach becomes real. And Heimdal's extended detection and response and our SOC services absolutely shine here, identifying those behavioral anomalies, executing playbooks to contain the intrusion, and ultimately being a line of defense when prevention fails. Installation. This is when the attacker establishes persistence, where Heimdal's privileged access management tool, PAM tool, ensures that only authorized users and services can make those critical changes. Pair that with our application control, and you can constrict who can run what, stopping malware from embedding itself in your environment. Command and control. This is where the attackers communicate with compromised systems remotely. And this is where Heimdal's managed detection and response solution actually will detect and disrupt this communication, cutting the attacker's lifeline and preventing them from issuing further commands or even exfiltrating any data. And then finally, the actions on objectives. Whether it's data theft, lateral movement, or launching further attacks, this ultimately is the attacker's endgame. And this is why ransomware encryption protection and our DNS security, to be fair, can contain the impact. Blocking encryption attempts, isolating compromised endpoints, and stopping command lookups in their tracks. So we can see here how this kill chain would have been stopped by multiple Heimdal products along that route. And we spoke a fair bit about NIS2 today, so I'm going to highlight a report that Heimdal have got. So what you see here is the NIS2 compliance report. Currently, in Heimdal's platform, you have this view of a through multiple what's the word say dashboards. You can see one screen, you can see multiple platforms feeding into it, and that's great for you as the end user. But in order to feed into that whole accountability aspect for management, they want to see it too, and they probably don't want to be having to log into a portal. So we've created this NIS2 report. It gives them the information they need to know to demonstrate they're providing effective governance. So we can see here, I was just zoomed in this section. And again, we spoke about vulnerability management. This here shows us that we've got 7 high and critical vulnerabilities that need addressing. So as management, you can read this report and then ask the appropriate questions of the security team, the CISO, whoever it may be, to say, hey, we've got 1 critical, 3 high third-party patches. Why are they there? What are we doing about it? It demonstrates effective governance, and it gives them the confidence, and we can evidence it, document it to show that effective governance and NIS2 compliance is in place.
Yeah, so this is a question that I've got received, Adam. With the report, the NIST and the DORA report, because you can show both of them, is it possible, because if you're seeing the NIST framework, so therefore is recovery is also one point of view, backup is not included in there. So how complete is the report, and can we edit them themselves, or can the MSPs edit them themselves so they can put in their backup data?
Yes, there's no reason. So first off, Heimdal don't cover backup, so that isn't in the report. The report is tailored to fit into the controls that you've got. So some people have the full stack from Heimdal. Some people have, let's just say they've just got the patch management piece. Yeah. When you run that NIS2 report, if you've just got the patch management piece, that report would just show you patch management. So yeah, 100%, I would expect that any organization that pulls that report down would then either embed that in something they're doing. Personally, the way I'd use it would be to probably embed it into a PowerPoint deck, take the bits that I want. So I just showed you, just hopping back, I just showed you this. I'd probably take something like that, the infographics there, and put that in the report, into the deck. But if you wanted to issue a report for them to read, then there's no reason why you can't then add additional elements to it to create a larger PDF style document that you can share. But yeah, so 100%, if you wanted to do that, I would say it's probably a wise move to do.
That's great. And also, this question came from Casper. Casper, if we're connecting, I got something for you to make a beautiful report with the NIS2 with your full stack in one overview. Do you know if it's possible to retrieve those data with an API, for example?
So at the moment, there isn't an API in place. But one thing I would say, which I've said, I mentioned to you before the call, Robin, I've been with Heimdal for 3 months now.
Yeah, I know. If it's too technical, please say so. Then
no. The reason I'm saying it is because in the 3 months I've been here, I've been absolutely blown away, because when people feed back saying, oh, do you know what, it'd be really good if you could provide this additional feature, Heimdal listen, and they're actively talking about it in the background, and we'll see soon we're releasing version 5 of the product. They take these changes on board and make the changes. So I'm not saying if one person says it, we're going to make the change, but we hear them all, and then we speak to our MSPs and say, what do you think about these? So if there's something like the API suggestion there that you think is a good idea, then please speak to your account managers, please speak to Robin, who relay it, and then we can look at adopting that, because to me, the API idea sounds like a good idea. But Morten, our CEO and founder, is very much in charge of that, and not me. So no promises from me today.
Of course. No, that's great.
Perfect. Right. So just to wrap up what we've got here, how would Heimdal have helped with this one? Well, if you have privileged access management, ransomware encryption protection, and the threat hunting and action center, this would have prevented the attack. Full stop. I have got agent fatigue report here, and I'm going to really quickly run through it because I know we've only got 7 minutes left, Robin. So I'm going to really fly through this very quickly because I think it's important for MSPs to hear, and they can go, if they're interested, do some digging in the background. So agent fatigue is a term that Heimdal have coined, and it's all about essentially having multiple platforms, we mentioned earlier, all feeding in huge amounts of information. And basically, this information overwhelming us humans, exhausting us. So we did a report into it, or a survey into it. We spoke with MSPs, and we found that 56% of MSPs we spoke to, they're drowning in a daily alert noise. 75% plus, or just over, of MSPs experience agent fatigue on at least a monthly basis. And having 4 or more unified platforms cuts alert fatigue, 4 or less unified platforms cuts alert fatigue by 50%. So the whole survey points to the idea of unification, simplification of what we're doing. It's all well and good having best in class here, there, and everywhere, but if the information is so rich, and then we as humans, our security teams, have got to go through it to simplify it, it's not realistically going to work on the long term. And we found a group of individuals that are already doing this, MSPs that are doing this. We've given them the name the pioneers. And these are the guys and girls that are effectively implementing security across businesses, as well as running a happy and healthy MSP. The report is out now, and you can see full information on our website. If you just Google MSP agent fatigue, you will find it. But ultimately, the recommendations in the report is to consolidate and integrate where we can, automate where possible, things like patching, like we discussed, and invest in compliance platforms. So make sure that you are monitoring what you're doing, so that you're understanding the purpose of why you're doing it.
That's great. I'll make sure to follow all the people up with the report. We have the report. I'll make sure to send it over to everybody to know about this. It's a
Perfect.
insanely good report.
I see. It's a very interesting read. So from me then, that is it. But I'm going to leave you with 3 core things. So cybersecurity is no longer a nice to have. We saw that from the start of the Estonian attacks in 2007. Prevention is most definitely better than cure. Think about those Danish attacks. The patch would have prevented all of this from happening. And then finally, as we just said, Heimdal does provide total security. So Robin, thank you very much. I'll hand the reins to you.
Thank you so much, Adam. And I've got 2 questions. I've got way more, but like 2 questions got voted up. So one of them, if Heimdal patches a system and it needs to reboot, but the customer is always putting the system in sleep mode, how does Heimdal handles the customer will reboot? How does he handle it?
So you'll get an additional notification from your Heimdal agent to inform you that you need a reboot. And then depending upon the controls you put in place. So again, this is really up to the security team as to how they choose to implement it. But you can set up a policy whereby when it comes to patch management, you allow the user, you give the user the power to say they can delay that restart, but they can delay it by 2 delays or 3 delays over a certain period of time. So ultimately, it's up to the individual MSP as to how they want to do it, how they want to implement it. But you can, with the Heimdal platform, give the end user the power to say, right now, for example, if I got a notice to say I need to restart, it would be a bad time. The webinar would end very quickly. So with the platform, the way we use it, I get multiple opportunities to do it within a set time frame. So it means you're meeting your compliance standards in terms of you're updating, applying those patches quickly, but you're giving the users power to make that decision so it suits them when it's happening.
That's great. And I also see the comment from Ellen as well, is you can always force it to reboot from the dashboard. So you see when things are needed to reboot. You can force it when it's live or when it's enabled out of sleep mode. Last question, Adam. Can Heimdal also block normal processes as like a kind of ring fencing? For example, PowerShell, which makes you see being used more and more. And is it a legal process?
Sorry, is it a legal process?
A legal, not an illegal, but an a legal.
Yeah. So 2 tools that come to mind here. You've got the privileged access management. So you can prevent users from doing certain things that require additional privileges. You've also got the application effectively whitelisting tool, or ring fencing tool. So essentially, any applications that you don't want people using, then they won't be able to use. And with additional of privileged access management on top of that, people won't be able to implement any admin level changes.
That's great. Thank you so much, Adam. Thanks for everything, and thanks to everybody who got to the webinar. Thank you so much, all. I will make sure to follow up on everybody with the recording. I'll make sure to follow up everybody with the agent fatigue report of Heimdal. It's an amazing report, so I will send it over to everybody. If somebody wants to book in a meeting together with me, so we can talk about how we can make sure to consolidate your tech stack, your security services, and make you eventually a more profitable MSP. Thank you so much for joining, Adam. Again, thank you so much, and I really love this webinar, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robin.
Cheers. Bye.